evening and welcome. It's 8 o'clock and you're watching Let's Kill Twitter with me, Julian Hall. This is the show that aims to detox your timeline with the art of conversation. A lofty task, I hear you say, and you're quite right. Fortunately, as you know, I don't have to do that alone. And joining me tonight to trawl through Twitter is financial writer and comedian Dominic Frisby. But before I introduce Dom properly, just a bit of tedious housekeeping. Well, I'll make it as less tedious as possible. You can watch us live on Facebook, on Twitch, and on YouTube, crucially. Obviously, if you're watching us live right now, you will be doing one of those things, so thank you very much. The record of this will be available on YouTube after the show. So if you know someone who would like to watch this, please do get them to check that out. And crucially, give us a subscribe on YouTube. I live for the subscribes. Equally, we live for the follows on Twitter. Obviously, it makes sense to follow us on Twitter. We're on where our handle is at LKTZoom, which you will see splashed liberally around this screen on my screen. Hang on a minute. I may have to mute our guest.
Sorry. He's right.
So it's on my byline and it's on the shared Twitter feed beside me, of course, and scrolling above my head is a lovely ticker that has our handle on. It has our website on. It has Dominic's handle on. The whole caboodle, essentially. And also, I'm very aware that this show was supposed to reach you on the 1st of August. It's now the 8th of August, but we got there in the end. So I'm just happy to be streaming. Now, I want to obviously introduce Dominic properly now. As I say, a financial writer, a comedian, an actor, a voiceover artist, you name it. I wanted to pick out a few highlights from underneath those little headings as well. And yet again, I'm heckled by Twitch. Oh, the chaos. It's been 2 weeks, folks. So as a financial writer, apart from being a regular columnist for Money Week, Dominic's also written for The Guardian and The Independent and a number of other magazines and newspapers. His books include Daylight Robbery, How Tax Shaped Our Past and Will Change Our Future. I'm particularly fond of that one because it came from Dominic's 2016 Edinburgh show, Let's Talk About Tax, which I PR'd, so I have to sort of declare that. Bitcoin, The Future of Money was Dominic's second book. I'm going in reverse order here, obviously. Sir Richard Branson, a big fan, as he exhorted, a great account, read it. And Life After the State, whose plaudits came from Al Murray and Steve Baker, amongst others. So that's ranging across the political spectrum to some extent there. And two other things that I wanted to pick out under the sort of financial heading for Dominic were the global financial crisis documentary Four Horsemen that Dominic narrated and co-wrote. And also Debt Bomb, which neatly straddles the sort of comedy and finance line. That became a viral hit, so check that out. That's still on YouTube. And in terms of comedy, well, just recently, many more people have known Dominic through the comedy songs that he's been releasing, some of which came from his 2019 Edinburgh show, Libertarian Love Songs. Yes, I also PR'd that. It's declaring time. But also, audience will know Dominic from emceeing Downstairs at the King's Head in London. And also, it says here, London's grooviest new club and sometimes most controversial, Comedy Unleashed. So, without too much further ado and tripping over my words any more than I do normally, it's time, by the power of Zoom and OBS, to unveil to you Dominic Frisby. Please welcome. Hello.
Hi, Julian. How's it going?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I think I've got the same cold this week that I had last week, but I'm just so relieved to be live and streaming and have you here at the same time. And thanks for giving up your time in the same time slot, essentially.
No problem. By the way, Richard Branson said, "Read it and glimpse into the future," or whatever he said about my book, but I still don't think he ever actually read it. He just told everyone else to. Typical billionaire.
Don't take the shine off. Don't take the shine off. But I mean, they're great. I mean, I haven't missed out a book, have I? Is there another book in?
No, I've only written 3.
Yeah. Okay, because I mean, it was quite an exciting time. The Let's Talk About Tax era. I sort of particularly fondly remember that. I mean, that was sort of very well received in Edinburgh. And how soon after the show did you actually write the book? Did the book come out?
Well, I was planning to knock it out in those 3 months between September and December, but ended up taking me 3 years.
Okay, right. Well, it's a bit like
It's a lot of work.
yeah, a long time. That's COVID proportions of time, I think.
Yeah, well, I can't blame COVID for it, but the thing about taxes, it's just a huge subject, and there's never been a civilization without taxation. And as soon as you start attempting to write the history of taxation, you find yourself rewriting the entire history of civilization. And there are so many good stories. And one of the themes of the book is that there is not a single great event from history that behind it didn't have some kind of tax story. And so I was basically going through every great event in history. And then the thing about history is it's very sort of, everybody argues about it. It's quite political history in a funny kind of way. So you have to be, the left like to put their slant on it and the right like to put their slant on it, and the authoritarian their slant and the libertarian their slant. So I had to be quite careful to make sure I got my facts right, and that just took an endless amount of work.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, well worth it in the end for sure. Now, obviously what we like to do on this show, it's all sort of social media based. I mean, we like to ask the guests what their sort of, what their sort of social media you use, but also what your impressions are, because, most people do not really enjoy social media, but they feel compelled to be on it. I mean, that's certainly Andrew Doyle says that quite a lot. And I've just been watching his show again on GB News, and there's a sort of section.
You do his PR?
I have done Andrew's PR as well, okay. But
you've got this niche in unacceptable right-wing comics.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I don't even see myself as right-wing, but everyone else does.
Well, I know when they announced the roster for GB News, I was thinking, wow, it's like my televised Edinburgh roster. I think there was some kind of survey a few months back of right-wing comedians that could be put on telly or something like that, and it's like, wow, that's my Edinburgh list. But
yeah.
Who knows? I mean, what's going to happen in the next few years in Edinburgh in terms of who wants PR and all the rest of it? I don't know. I mean, it's quite weird to be in a situation where Edinburgh's going on and we're not there.
I think this year is a really good year to do Edinburgh if you're a performer. And most performers haven't been able to get a show together. They haven't been able to do previews. They've thought to themselves, what's the point of writing a show if we don't even know if it's going ahead? We've only found out like last week that the rooms are fully opened up. But talking to people who are actually in Edinburgh, there's nothing to see. So if you're an act, there's very little competition. It's one of those years where you'll be able to get an audience really quite easily if you've somehow been able to get your show up there, mostly free Fringe shows. But I've noticed a lot of people who've got like their show on for 3 nights or something, they're all doing extra nights and extra shows. There really isn't that much on. So, and I think there'll be a real kind of, there won't be that many tourists. The audience will be mostly local. So you won't have that thing of, baffled Japanese people looking at your show or something like that. It'll all be, mostly English speaking. And I just think as a performer, if you can get up there somehow, this will be a really good year to do it. Next year will be really hard because the audience will grow on this year, but every performer will want to go up next year because they didn't do a show there this year. So this is the year to do, and next year's the one to miss.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. The fallow year sort of thing.
Yeah.
Actually, just in case anyone thinks you're being glib about tourists turning up in your show, I need to sort of vouch for how valid that is. I was in one of Olaf Falafel's shows, and it was down when which venue was it? In the City Cafe, and then about halfway through, the entire sort of Chinese junior Olympic gymnastic team turned up at the back. Only in Edinburgh, let's face it.
Yeah, well, it is only in Edinburgh. I mean, Alec Guinness refused to act in the West End anymore because he said the audiences aren't. He hated performing to tourists. I'm not knocking tourists, but comedy is the single hardest thing to understand in any foreign language. I speak 5 languages, and comedy is really hard to understand in foreign languages. It's the hardest thing to do, and the most lucrative form of comedy is always visual comedy. Mr. Bean, Benny Hill, that kind of stuff. It just was huge worldwide because you don't need to speak a language to understand it. If you want to make a lot of money as a comedian, become a visual comic is my advice. But the reality is, because comedy is so hard to understand, and if somebody's from wherever it is, and English isn't their first language, they have a completely different frame of reference. You know, it's just much harder as a performer. That's all I meant by that. There was no slight of the Japanese. I'm fully on board with Japanese people coming to Edinburgh because that's what the Fringe is all about. Just don't buy tickets for my show.
So what's now, I mean, in terms of Twitter, you know, you're a Twitter, so we mentioned Andrew there, sort of slightly gone off track, but you're a Twitter user, but how do you actually feel about using Twitter? I mean, do you enjoy it as a medium?
Well, I use it for several different things, and I've got mixed feelings about it. There's definitely an emotion that comes over you when you start using it, where you get really wound up and you want to start arguing with people. Like, I've known Hal Cruttenden since I was 7 years old. We were in the same class as each other at school. We got the same grades in our A levels. We are born on the same day. The first girl I ever got off with was at Hal's house when I was, 15 years old or something.
I was wondering where that story was going, but that's fine.
Yeah. And it wasn't Hal. and we've had this incredibly intertwined life. We got married at the same time. We became comics at the same time. Blah blah blah. And Hal's a real lefty, and I'm just, he wants state this and state that, and blah blah blah. And I just think the state is the cause of all our problems. So we have this sort of ideological difference. But we had a massive spat on Twitter.
I did witness that, actually,
about a month ago, and it got so out of hand. I actually phoned up Hal, said, "Look, Hal, it's me here," and then he was just screaming down the phone, "You're a fucking disgrace! You're an absolute fucking disgrace!" And I was like, "Whoa, Hal, it's me!" And we kind of kissed and made up. But I remember thinking, wow, if Twitter can make you fall out with somebody who you've known since you were 7 years old, and we're both 51, so that's 44 years of friendship, it's a pretty powerful, enraging thing.
Yeah. No,
where I think Twitter is so I don't, and it's, it's really politicized the world. I mean, we're all politicized anyway at the moment. And I really wonder if social media is the cause. I sometimes think it is, but it might just be that I happen to think it's 30 or 40 years of government where everything just gets brushed under the carpet and nothing gets addressed and properly, and just gets pushed into the future. I kind of think that's the cause of all the division. But social media is definitely
it's fuel to the fire, I think. Yeah,
exactly. But where I really like Twitter is it's an amazing source of information. So, like, I've written a book about Bitcoin. I look at stocks and shares. You can get really good, what they call FinTwit, financial Twitter. The advice you can get, the insights you can get off there in real time. You'd be paying thousands of pounds in newsletters to get that information. So from that point of view, it's brilliant. As a news source, I think it's brilliant because, if there's a fire in Greece, somebody's on the boat where the fire is and they video the fire in Greece, and it's up on Twitter, and it's ahead of the news. It's faster than the news. If there's any kind of stock market crash or something's going on, I'm straight on Twitter because it's just the most brilliant immediate source of information. So from that point of view, it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, it just as a very small anecdotal example of that, there was I live not that far from Elephant Castle, where the scene of a number of fires recently, and the latest one, I was sort of in my lounge when it happened. I heard this thing that sounded like a kind of clap of thunder, and then this sort of plume of smoke, and I wasn't quite sure what was going. Luckily, it was raining at the time, which I think may have helped put it out. But I knew, it's like, how am I going to find out what's going on here? Well, within about 8 minutes or something, there was live, somebody taking live footage and all the rest of it.
And like somebody's put this footage up of this fire in Kuwait, this tire fire in Kuwait.
Oh, the tire fire, yeah.
But that's just it's fake. It's been debunked, and so there is a lot of. It's just like somebody fucking around with 3D effects or whatever.
Well, that's the other side of the coin, though, isn't it? As much as we both agree that it's an excellent news source, the verification is sometimes,
I was about to say, there's been studies of this by a lady. I met her, but I've forgotten her name. But she's at King's University, and she's done loads of studies into it. And they've discovered that actually, for all the fake news, we filter it out. And And so it's actually not that big a spread of misinformation as we think it is, as those who would have you believe it is. And I actually think that, for example, if we'd had Twitter or mobile phones, for example, in 1914, the First World War would have ended really quickly.
Yeah.
Because there would have been footage uploaded from the trenches.
Yeah.
Everyone would have gone, what the fuck? And it would have stopped. And so from that point of view, the technology is very empowering for citizens. And I think that might be the cause of this anger, because so much of politicians' bullshit is just instantaneously exposed by social media in a way that it wasn't 30 or 40 years ago. So again, it's very powerful from that point of view. So I do think ultimately it empowers citizens.
We seem to have the gremlins a little bit because you've frozen, and I don't really know why this time. But I don't know if you could stop your video, that might help us. But it could be. Your voice is coming over loud and clear, though. Don't worry. Let's have a look. That's perfect. Yes, and you're back in the room. Hopefully that won't happen too often.
Sorry about that.
So, well, it could well be me. We'll see.
Well, I'm in Brockley in southeast London, and the what do you call it? The Wi-Fi is just so bad that I've abandoned. We can't get fibre optic broadband. It was zone 2.
I know. Don't worry. I've had exactly that conversation.
So I've just got a 5G router on my roof, and so it can be a bit in and out.
Okay, may not be me this time. I've had a very interesting week of the tech variety, I have to say. So yeah, I mean, that's interesting what that lady said that you mentioned earlier about us filtering out the fake news. I think that's true to some extent, and there are some there are some kind of fairly bonkers examples of. And the easiest one to fake is basically, here's some footage of a demonstration, and actually this demonstration was 2017 in whatever, but it could be very easily transposed to be, rent your own demo.
It's amazing how many. It's amazing how many, like even the BBC does it. They just, it's like they go onto Getty Images or something and type in Riot. Oh, there's a picture of the riot, put it up, and they put that up as the whatever it is, whatever the latest riot is, anti-vax passports or something, and then somebody else will go, but no, that photo was taken in 2017. So it's also proved a wonderful way of holding news broadcasters to account, and again has exposed the amount of fake news that there was. I mean, if you ever read an article by a journalist about a subject that you happen to know a lot about, so say for example you mentioned Elephant and Castle, I'm guessing I thought you lived in Waterloo, but is it Elephant and Castle? No,
I'm near Elephant actually. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say there was an article about the water, I don't know, or
maybe about
the Elephant and Castle shopping
centre,
something like that. There's something really specific, or just something specific to you, or about right-wing comedy, or something that you know a lot about. You read the article, and whenever there's an article about something you know a lot about, you read the article and you go, no, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. Every person that has their subject that they know about, that reads an article in the Guardian or the Telegraph or whatever it is, just written by just a hack writer, if you sort of compound that, you suddenly realize just there's so much bullshit in the news, and I actually think social media is a way of getting to the truth. For all the fake news, I think it is ultimately given us greater insight and greater truth.
Yeah, I mean, we've had an interesting discussion a few editions sort of back about whether social media is now serving the people, or whether it's actually now sort of hampering the people, as it were. Whatever the people is, of course, that's a debate in itself. Yeah. Well, there you go. Now I've jumped around slightly actually, because what I meant to do was talk about so before we dip into your tweets, which cover a lot of what we've just mentioned and a few of the themes we've just mentioned, I wanted to talk about, obviously Edinburgh's going on, so it's timely to talk about this. You've got a new film out, Adam Smith, Father of the Fringe. Tell us more. What's Adam Smith got to do with the Fringe?
Well, I don't know how much you know about how the Fringe came about, but in 2019, the Fringe sold more tickets than any other event in the world that year. And in any given year, it will sell more tickets than any other event in the world, except the Olympic Games. That's the only event that sells more tickets. And they're every 4 years. The Fringe is annual. It's an incredible economic success story. The population of Scotland of Edinburgh is, I think it's 450, 500,000. In a year, 4 million people come to Edinburgh. And you go, how did it become so big? And I don't know if you know the story of how it started. It was 1947, and this guy called Rudolph Bing put on the Edinburgh International Festival, and he got a load of subsidy to put it on, and he was going to heal the wounds of war through the languages of the arts. And he had like the Halle Orchestra and the Vienna Philharmonic and Sadler's Wells Ballet and Glyndebourne Opera and all this really highbrow stuff. And there were like 8 like semi-amateur, semi-professional groups. There was like a Marxist theatre group from Glasgow that was set up to bring drama of relevance to working people.
And they're still there, aren't they?
I don't think they are. Well,
Okay.
there'll be similar groups there.
Yeah.
But they all wanted to come and appear at this inaugural Fringe. And Rudolph Bing, the organiser, said, no, you're not good enough. You know, we want this highbrow, we want the Halle Orchestra, we want Sadler's Wells. And they were like, well, screw that, we're going to come anyway. And so they just turned up, and they were known as the Uninvited 8. There were only 8 groups, Puppeteer from Malvern and a couple of others. And they did incredibly well. And the following year, you know, Bing put on his international festival again. And the following year, there were 9 uninvited groups, which is a 12.5% increase on the previous year. And it just grew like that every year, 5, 10, 15% growth. But by the time you compound that, and it's just been an incredible economic success story. Now, why does a performer go to Edinburgh? Well, there are 4 reasons, and they all boil down to one thing. But the 4 reasons are basically, one is they go to get noticed. They want to be discovered. They want to be the next Fleabag or the next Flight of the Conchords, whatever it is. 2, they go to get better. You know, 25 nights doing a show, you just get better. 3rd, people go to make money. You can actually make money in Edinburgh. And 4th, people go to have fun. And it's usually all those 4 reasons put together, or 2 or 3 of them, but they all boil down to one thing, and that is self-interest. They're not going to Edinburgh to like feed the homeless or solve climate change or anything like that. They're going, you know, a performer goes with their own self-interest in mind. And the great Adam Smith quote that kind of sums up everything Adam Smith said is, it is not from the benevolence of the baker, the brewer, or the butcher that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. And Adam Smith's idea was that in acting in our own self-interest, we actually we further society as a whole. And this was his great philosophy that people still struggle 200 years later to get their heads around. And this started as a show in 2019, as a lecture, which took place in the room that Adam Smith finished Wealth of Nations in. And it was like a history of the Fringe through the perspective of Adam Smith. It was a sort of bizarre, I actually only wrote it the night before. I booked it in and I knew what I wanted to say in my head, but I had to do an all-nighter the night before to write it. But it's such a powerful story. It just went down really well. And so me and Alex Webster, the director, who's a friend of mine, we said, look, this was last summer now, there's a massive shortage of content on the telly. If we can go and make a really good film, put together a good film, there might be an opportunity to break into the closed shop that's telly. So we went up and we shot this documentary in the year the Fringe was cancelled. And then my manager was going, no, this is really good. You should get an interview with Jimmy Carr. You should get an interview with Al Murray, blah, blah, blah. So I got interviews, and then I landed an interview with Jimmy, and then Jimmy had been to Dubai and he came back. He had to do 2 weeks in quarantine. So that put the Jimmy interview back. And then there was something else that put something. So it constantly got delayed. Yeah. So we never quite managed to finish it while there was the content shortage. And then like by about November, we had all like meetings with head honchos at the BBC and stuff, but you know, it was Zoom meetings to nowhere and emails into the void. Nobody was fucking interested, even with Jimmy Carr and Al Murray and Henning Wehn and Arthur Smith and Shazia. And so Shazia Mirza. So we were like, oh, fuck, we're just going to have to put this on YouTube. But we had loads of archive footage in it, and we needed a bit of money to just finish off the post-production, do the grading, get it looking good, get the music get some original music composed and all of this. And then I was in, I just got this weird phone text message. No, it was an email from a guy, and he goes, oh, I've just had a near-death experience with COVID. I was 36 hours from death, apparently, but I've been watching some of your YouTube videos while I'm in hospital, and I just wanted to write and thank you for all the laughter you brought me while I was so close to death. I really appreciate it, and I'd really like to help you out if I can in some way. And by the way, I'm a video games entrepreneur, and I'm worth 150 million pounds. So I said, well, we got this film, but we need a bit of money to get it over the line, and the money was in my account the very next day.
Oh, dear.
So it's Adam Smith would be proud of that. So that's how the film happened, and we've literally just finished it 2 or 3 days ago, and we've got it up on the website, and we just had our first review an hour ago. Very nice review from Bruce Dessau. So let's hope it does well.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. When he said, we're saying about him being close to death and he'd watched some of your YouTube videos, I thought you were going to say, and that pushed him a bit closer. But anyway, obviously, Toho. But it is an amazing story, and also a lot of hurdles. I'd forgotten about the whole quarantine issue that the various contributors, would have had to sort of jump through in order for this to be made. So it's been quite a labour of love,
Oh, it's been a huge undertaking. But it's really good. I mean, it's easily good enough to be on BBC 4 or BBC 1 or whatever. Everyone who's watched it said how good it is. So, it's only on for the 3 weeks of the Fringe, and then we'll see what we can do with it after that.
And that's via Panmure House. Well, it's the virtual festival, isn't it? But I think it's Panmure House.
Yeah, if you just Google Father of the Fringe, Dominic Frisby. Yeah. I've got it on my Twitter. It's on the header of my Twitter. By the way, I don't know if you found this is true or not, Julian, but I've been told, and I sort of experienced this, Twitter doesn't work for selling tickets. It's Facebook and LinkedIn are much better for selling tickets, and Twitter's just sort of micro.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, it's. I mean, I think Insta as well is quite important. Regrettably,
I'm not even on that one.
Well, I think I found your handle on Insta.
Well, no, it's a fake account. There's a fake Dominic Frisby account on there.
Dude.
Giving people Bitcoin trading advice. And
right. Okay. All right. I forgot about that. I do remember.
There is one that's me, and there's another one that's just completely copied me, and I've reported it to Instagram about 1 million times. And he DMs. I get these messages from friends of mine going, "Why are you sending me these weird messages on Instagram?" And it's like, oh, fucking hell, it's not me.
Actually, that's a really good point. If you want back-end support from people like Twitter and Facebook, then you could just forget it. You might as well just whistle in the wind.
I mean, they're like really good at censoring wrong speak, but they can't fucking stop impersonators. And I think the impersonators ultimately do more damage than wrong speak.
Well, yeah, exactly. So let's let us. You mentioned but essentially we've carried over the tweets that you chose for last Sunday to this Sunday, but there's obviously flexibility around that. And just a minute ago, you mentioned that you tweeted something this week about a film. Now, is that another film? Is there another film in the mix?
Yeah, I'm trying to make a film of daylight robbery, the thing about tax. There's a cryptocurrency called Decred, which is like a really cool cryptocurrency. It's got a whole community around it. And it's what's known as a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization.
Okay.
Now, and the idea of DAOs are going to change the world.
Okay, carry on. Yeah, I'm just scrolling.
DAOs are going to. Okay.
Because you said there was a tweet on it.
All loads of
that's okay. How far back is it?
It should be. It's a bit further. It should be somewhere around about.
Oh, hang on. That's just mentioned DAO. Right. Sorry. Tell us about DAOs. I need to be educated.
So, if you think that the idea of Bitcoin is that it's a decentralized currency. If you wanted to, close down the pound, you could bomb the Bank of England and close down. I mean, you couldn't really close down the pound, but there have been previous attempts at non-state money, and they've all been closed down because they had what's called a central point of failure. They had an office or something that they could close down, a central organization. The idea of Bitcoin is it's decentralized. No one person's in charge. It's run by a network of different computers all over the world, and therefore it cannot be shut down. You can make Bitcoin illegal in one country or another, but you can't close down Bitcoin. And this power of decentralized technology, distributed technology, is incredibly powerful. And people don't realize how it's going to change the world. And the next step from Bitcoin, decentralized currency, is decentralized autonomous organizations. And so instead of being a company with an HQ somewhere, and you can close down that company or attack that company or do whatever. These organizations have no HQ. They're on the internet. They're borderless, you know, and one of these new organizations is a thing called Decred, which is it's a decentralized autonomous organization built around this currency called Decred. And the technology is really good, and they've got all sorts of interesting widgets, and you know, a lot of the techno geeks say how good Decred is, and I'm one of those. I think it's brilliant. But because of the system, they have built up a treasury of Decred that they want to invest in projects that will help move the Decred project forward. And so that might be, you know, infomercials or going to talk about Decred at a conference or whatever it is, stuff to do with technology. And the Decred community, so anyone who owns Decred then votes on whether this proposal should be given the money to go ahead. So I approached Decred and I said to them, I want to make this film about tax, and you know, governance is a huge part of Decred, and governance is everything to do with tax. The people who like my film will be interested in Decred. Will Decred give me the money I need to make this film? And you know, the Decred watermark will be on the film. It'll be, you know, it would be a bit like, you know, Carlsberg bringing you the Champions League final or something like that. But also Decred would be Disney or HBO, as well as being the, you know, they'd be the broadcaster as well as the sponsor. So I said I'd help raise, because Decred's problem is it has no awareness. So I said I'll help raise awareness of Decred with this film if you give me the money to make the film. So there was a big debate about whether they should do it or not. And there was all sorts of arguing over social media that went on for about a month, which was as vitriolic as an attack as I've ever had on social media, by the way. And then
sorry, we've got double and double here. Right, something interesting going. You've frozen, and I think I may have somehow lost the stream. I'm not quite sure how. Hang on, and I think you're back in the room. Yeah, great. We've never quite experienced this before. So yeah, okay.
The short of it was we had the vote, and did Decred want to give me the money? And it was an overwhelming no. But unfortunately, I think it would have been a good project for me, and it would have been a good project for them. But they voted no, and so tough titty. So that was what that was all about.
So what I mean, the thing is, there are a number of us that haven't really got a Scooby-Doo, which is probably the name of an alternative currency, about sort of Bitcoin and the ascendant. I mean, what I do read is there's an awful lot of other kind of alternatives and what have you.
Thousands.
You know, and that's what's the deal with the potential for, you know, is it in the ascendant? Is its time? Essentially, what I'm trying to say is its time coming?
Yeah, I'll say it's the future. The 100%. It's a borderless system of money for the borderless medium that is the internet, and you know, more and more people are becoming borderless. The digital nomad is the fastest growing workforce in the world. Even COVID, bizarrely, has accelerated it because it's normalized remote working. And people are going, do you know what? I don't want to be in England anymore with this, that, and the other. I'm going to Mexico, or I'm going to Lisbon, or I'm going to Malta, or wherever you can go.
Yeah.
And it's particularly a young thing. Work on the internet. They don't need to be in a country anymore. And as there's more and more cross-border work going on, which the internet facilitates, it does not make sense to go through all the hurdles and hoops and costs that you have to go through, you know, with Forex and everything else. And with Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency you want to use, you get instantaneous money transfers as quick as you send an email at a fraction of the cost. And it's direct, me to you, no banking, no middlemen, no nothing. And so, yeah, I mean, it's the future, 100%.
And then what do you answer? What's the sort of game plan in terms of how it affects the state, and how, you know, what's the sort of beyond
the nation state is doomed, Julian. The nation state is bankrupt. The nation state, we tend to think of nation states being normal. They're not. They've only been around for 200 or 300 years, and they were built after the Industrial Revolution with tax systems designed around the physical movement of goods and services and physical labor that was in one place. And the world has moved on. If you just look at how the nation state has struggled to tax globalized corporations, they can't. The tax models have been unable to keep up. And they're talking about these, alliances with G7 and all that. It just won't work. And, meanwhile, the nation states are all printing money and debasing their money like mad to print and cover their spending. The tax revenue doesn't match their costs. They're in shed loads of debt. And, they're bankrupt in everything but name. And of course, and some nation states are going to go bankrupt. And we will see new, much smaller city states arise. And those countries that adapt best to the realities of the new economic environment around us will be those that thrive. And those that insist on huge, unsustainable welfare spending will be the ones that die.
Well, pretty clear. So we've got, again, you've frozen again. I don't know what it is, and I'm going to apologise to viewers. I have had a sort of thorough health check of the.
It'll be my fault.
Well, it could be, but it has happened before. So I apologise to the viewers. But we've done a few full tech check here, but I will go through it again. We're probably going to take a couple of weeks off in August anyway, so I've got time to write that out. But no, thanks for being clear on that. Sort of demystifies it slightly, and there's a couple of ways we can go from that, because actually people's relationship to the state has been a big deal because of COVID, and there's a couple of tweets on that, and I certainly want to get to one of them. But on the tweets that you chose a week ago that we're picking up this week, I'm pretty sure there was another. Hang on, let me not go back to our account.
Most of my tweets are just links to articles I've written, or they're promoting something. I don't think I'm actually very good on Twitter. There are people who are much better than me. It is addictive, though. You can just waste your whole day on it.
I know, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it, actually. But you definitely had. Here it is. It was the City AM article. So what's going on here with Bitcoin and Amazon?
Well, Amazon put out an advert that they were hiring I can't even remember now, but they were hiring some kind of specialist in crypto currency coding to help them build a payments architecture so that they could accept Bitcoin and various other coins. And so some journalist noticed it and got straight onto the point and said, well, if they're hiring a guy to do this, then it's a short step to Amazon accepting Bitcoin as payment and various other cryptocurrencies. So they wrote that article. Amazon then denied it afterwards, but I mean, it's inevitable that Amazon will start accepting cryptocurrencies payments where it can legally do so.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, because this will be a podcast as well as on YouTube, it's a City AM article. Amazon definitely lining up Bitcoin payments and token, confirms Insider. And then you quote tweeted, a bullish development, I'd say. Amazon definitely linking up Bitcoin payments and token.
Well, that's an example of fake news and clickbait, because the title says Amazon definitely blah blah blah, but it's actually the person who works for Amazon saying Amazon are definitely doing it. It wasn't Amazon saying Amazon are definitely doing it, if that makes sense.
But that's
Amazon aren't definitely.
Well, it's a source fairly close to the horse's mouth, which is better than some stories actually.
Yeah, but the more big companies that start using cryptocurrency, the more good it is the more bullish it is for cryptocurrency. The thing to remember, Julian, is that money has always been related to technology. And so, we started using coins only after people found ways to stamp coins which would certify the amount of precious metal in a coin, and the stamp of the issuer guaranteed the purity. Then with the invention of the printing press, we started using paper money. Then with the invention of telegrams and cables and cross-channel communications, because money is a form of communication as well. We could start sending money across the Atlantic by telex or whatever it was, telegraph, and then with digital technology in the 70s and 80s, money became digital. We stopped using checks. Paper money's on its way out. Only about 2 or 3% of money is now actual cash. 97, 98% is digital, and crypto is just the latest evolution, really.
Okay.
So it's technology is destiny.
So, look, the relationship with the state is well, you phrased it again, so I'm sorry about this.
Oh.
I'm quite sure what that's. I know it's a bit laborious for you to have to do. I'm sorry about that. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm flicking through the website web pages here as well, just to sort of check how the broadband's doing, and it seems to be okay. But we've had an interesting ride. Now let's pick up. You see, look, one of the things that it does sort of fascinate me is the relationship between people and the state, and obviously COVID has massively tested that, not just in the UK, loads of other countries as well. And it's been a time where people's political identities have probably either been forged if they're of a certain age, or they've been sharpened in terms of what they already were anyway. One of the tweets that you've picked out, Jameson Lopp, Cyberpunk, co-founder and CTO
Cypherpunk.
Cypherpunk of Casa. Oh, it's a right. So there is a Bitcoin link. I see. There is
yeah, he's a Bitcoiner.
He's a Bitcoiner. Okay. So it's just it's just the kind of graph. The black line goes cases, hospitalizations, death, which goes in this kind of, I don't know what you call that in the graph speak when it does that sort of peak. It's just essentially a peak. An L.
The graph goes up and down.
An L. Oh, the bell, and then totalitarianism basically just exponentially right. Well, not. It seems to have been plateauing out. So if you really wanted to be negative, it would just be exponentially rising. But it seems to be plateauing out. So who knows? I mean, look, it's nice to have you in the room, because I know that if all the people that I would want to explain to me the antipathy towards the state would probably be you, rather than others that I could mention, although there are some other people who say some interesting things that I sort of have time for, and so on and so forth. But I've been getting increasingly sort of piqued by the sort of the Braveheart sort of overtones of freedom. I mean, just put them all in Leicester Trafalgar Square, rather, to shout freedom at each other as loud as they possibly can. And the catastrophe, and you don't do this, but the catastrophizing on Twitter, which I know, we talked about social media and it brings it out of people, but the catastrophizing language, it has literally just been, classic lectern stuff. It's been so sort of pessimistic. It's pushed Orwellian beyond the barriers of Orwellian, I think. It's just gone a little bit bonkers, really, I think. But if you are of the view to be afraid, very afraid, that's okay, and I want you to kind of explain why. But obviously you have to sort of bear in mind that when people like me are watching the latest gathering in Trafalgar Square and all the rest of it, and have to sort of listen to people banging on about the Nuremberg trials, etc., it doesn't it doesn't play well to the moderates.
Well, that's whenever you get a demonstration, it doesn't matter if it's Occupy London or Extinction Rebellion or whoever it is. When you get those movements, you're always going to get, oddballs and cranky people at the extreme, and their ideological opponents will always select them and make out that those oddballs are speaking on behalf of everyone else who's there. So that's just misrepresentation and straw manning and so on.
But
that goes on both sides.
On a platform. That person was on the...
Oh, you're talking about David Icke speaking.
No, I mean, gosh, David Icke's a real precursor to all this, I think. But
no, he was on the thing a couple of weeks ago. He spoke on the he was on the podium talking about something or other.
It's the former nurse that was banging on.
Oh yeah, I didn't see what she said, but I heard about her. Yeah, but again, I just saw loads of people who were again, I wasn't at the march, so I don't know. This is just people wittering on Twitter that I was following. But the sense, and again, it's my little bubble, but the sense that I got was that she didn't speak for everyone there, and they were quite pissed off that she'd been given the platform. But now that she was given the platform, her ideological opponents will use her as a smearing device.
But I mean, one of the other problems is that it's when you look around and you've got the likes of sort of Piers Corbyn and Right Said Fred and all the rest of it, it's it's quite easy to sort of take the piss. And let's face it, other people as comedians would not be doing their job if they didn't take the piss. But
well, we'll see what happens. But I mean, Piers Corbyn is, but can you not see how freedoms have been lost this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that,
never mind whether they've been rightly or wrongly lost, never mind the justification. You know, we are considerably less free than we were. We can't go to places. We can't move around. You know, the vaccine passports are now going to be a thing.
I don't know. You see, I'm not, well, I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, you are. My kids are all, you know, all busy. They've all had COVID. They're resistant to it. They've had, and you know, they're not going to get ill from it in any way. They're all having the vaccine just so they go to nightclubs.
Well, I mean,
you know, so
yeah, of course,
it is a thing, and the idea that you have to have a vaccine, that is a dramatic loss of freedom. And you know, on the whole, it seems that vaccine is okay, but there are people who've died from it, and it is still experimental. So to force everyone to have some kind of experimental medical technology that hasn't been properly
it's only you see, I don't want to end up having the same sort of things that I've been listening to on
no. I'm not saying I agree with those arguments, Julian. I'm just saying those are all ways in which our freedoms have been eroded. So people who are concerned about that, their concerns are quite real and quite legitimate. You may not agree with them, but there has been a dramatic loss of freedom. And we do have this new kind of rulership, where it's rulership by health and safety, or this sort of as some people call it, the medical dictatorship. And it's like a whole, you know, when the government provides something, as in state healthcare or public healthcare, that thing becomes the means of rule. And it's, you know, it's been noticed by left and right. The NHS has replaced the Church of England as the national religion. And you either worship at the altar of the NHS or you don't. And there are plenty of people who don't, and there are plenty of people who do. And I'm one of those who don't, but I can sympathise and understand with those who do, because I think their intentions on the whole are well placed, even if the realisation of those intentions is misguided. But the NHS, you know, the church used to be the main provider of care. So there's obviously some human psychological thing where we feel this need to worship at whatever provides us with care. And that's why the NHS is sort of the new church. And by the way, it's Polly Toynbee calls it the national religion, and Nigel Lawson called it the national religion, who are, you know, left and right as traditional.
Well, I don't know what context. I mean, I'm not sure that what context they were saying it in, but I mean, yeah, I mean, look, there's the NHS in terms of being a political football. We all know that's.
No, I'm not talking about a football. I'm talking about a religion.
Yeah, I know.
It's a belief system.
But it's a
statism is a belief system.
That's because people put their health before other concerns by and large. That's not necessarily. I mean, there's obviously been this to and fro, and the balancing act between the economy and between health has been very difficult to strike. And it's just the fact that, you know, they've put the emphasis, you know, we have had lockdowns, we've had restrictions of our freedom. I mean, right at this point right now, those restrictions are nowhere near as obviously as you know, as dramatic as they were. I mean, yes, if you look at Australia, they've had quite a turnover of
Australia's insane.
Yes, well, it's a different, yeah, I mean, it seems like a very difficult
they're beating up kids and stuff because they're going out without masks. Like, whoa, what?
I haven't heard. Well, I mean, I was worried. I mean, that was the fever, the atmosphere. Certainly, when the mask issue.
You can't travel. You can't move around.
I mean, I was loss
of freedom. I mean, it's really, it's quite serious. Because if the virus doesn't go away, then that loss of freedom is permanent, and that is very significant, Julian.
Well, it depends how. Okay,
you can say it's right because of the virus and blah blah blah, or you can say no, it's a loss of freedom. Both arguments can be made. None of that changes that freedom has gone, and so people crying out for it. There's quite a legitimate reason to cry out for it.
But the attitudes to wearing masks at the start were quite childish, really, and that was right at the beginning. In terms of, oh, you know, I don't want to wear it and all the rest of it. And there's been an awful lot of that. This tends to sort of undermine anything. I mean, look, if you're getting, I didn't know about that situation in Australia, but I was very worried about something similar in the UK. By and large, people have just left it to, you know, their own personal choice in terms of where they wear masks. And when I go on public transport, whether that's overground and underground, the majority are still wearing masks. I mean, in London, obviously, that's different. There are different regulations, and they have been the mayor's obviously underlined those in a way that hasn't necessarily been done throughout the rest of the UK.
I think outside of London, people are much more respectful of mask use than they are in London.
I think it's been incredible. I think it's actually been pretty good in London. Actually, I'm really surprised.
Well, maybe, but I mean, yeah, I don't. I would say, I don't know, Julian, but I would say mask use on the tube is only at about 60% at the moment, a bit more than half.
Well, I mean, even if that were the case, even sort of 65% is probably more than I thought than it would be. I mean, look, one of the other things that's going on, of course, at the moment as well is the crime and policing bill. So, I mean, that's kind of not come at a very good time in the mix of all of this. So we can certainly have a debate about the authoritarian sort of direction of this government. There's no doubt about that.
Oh my God. You know, we have seen the most almighty power grab over the last 18 months. This country is significantly more authoritarian than it was 18 months ago. And, you know, one of the great lessons of this book, Daylight Robbery, is that with every crisis, and I regard taxation as a form of taxation is power. You know, if the government loses its tax revenue, it loses its power, or a king or an emperor, whatever it is. And it's a means of control. You know, you design a society by the way you tax it. And the evidence of history is that with every single crisis, you know, World War I, World War II, whatever it is, government power increases, taxes increase in a way that they couldn't without that emergency. We saw it 2008, the financial crisis. Suddenly we got quantitative easing and printing money and zero interest rates. In a normal environment, no government could have ever got that past the electorate. Oh, no, but there's a financial crisis. We need to print money. And then suddenly, you know, 12 years later, the government's printing £1.5 billion every day. You know, it's just quantitative easing has become normal. And yet it's printing money. And so the evidence of every crisis is that government control increases during the crisis, and then after the crisis has passed, it never goes back to the level it was at before the crisis began. And so we will see the same with COVID. You know, all the ways by which the tentacles of the state have reached out over the course of the last year. What we had in 2019, we will never see again.
Well, I mean, as I say before, you know, this whole thing is people have obviously had to question their relationship with the state and what they actually want the state to do. And I would argue that if you're going to go into politics and you want to actually change anything, then you might as well be elected to a government that actually has the power to change things. But you know, you can have an argument about the crime and policing bill, and you can talk about authoritarianism in the, you know, if you can go in various different directions on that, but there is a discussion there. And one of the things that occurred to me, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what you think, is that the climate crisis surely suggests that we will have more more restrictions of some kind.
Of course, 100%.
Yeah.
And you know who causes the biggest damage to the environment? The government.
Well,
like they're so fucking hypocritical about the whole thing. You know, the government is the biggest creator of waste, and they're the single most damaging entity, and they're the one thing that doesn't shrink.
Yeah, but it's their efforts to actually rein back on that are going to be, you know, very unpopular.
If you take this green energy revolution that they're trying to get everyone carbon neutral by, the amount of fossil fuel that is going to need to be burnt in order to realize the green energy revolution, you reach the point, you know, in all the metals that need to be mined and so on, and you know, you reach the, you know, what's more environmentally friendly, keeping the old banger or buying some brand new sparkling Tesla that's got a gazillion different exotic metals in it? It's way more environment friendly to keep the old banger. But you follow the government green energy revolution, everyone's going to be buying brand spanking new Teslas, and that demands a huge cost to the environment to actually realize. And
Are you just saw Elon Musk for reneging on Bitcoin, or?
No, I'm not. I'm using.
But we can't buy Teslas.
Because
they're not accessible, though, are they?
Well, Tesla, you know, Tesla survives on government subsidy. If it didn't if without government subsidy, Tesla would not be a legitimate business. It's crony capitalism, pure and simple. Tesla. the idea that he's this great risk-taking entrepreneur. No, he's just sucking on the teat of the state.
Well, I mean, but I don't think. But I was just picking up on the Teslas aren't. It's not like they're hugely accessible cars though at this stage.
What, because they're so expensive? You mean?
Yeah. I mean, they're still.
I know. I'm not saying everyone's going to be buying a Tesla, but the point I'm making is that this planned green energy revolution, we have to have these new boilers by 2030 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
All the metal that's involved in getting everyone on these new boilers, the cost to houses, many of whom really cannot afford it, and it's all cost of government, and it ultimately is not as environmentally friendly as they would have you believe. And so it's hypocritical.
But the margins that they're playing
and yet
with,
they will use it. Who's the government to tell you what kind of boiler you can use in your house? Like, at what point? Like, surely that is a choice that informed individuals and citizens can make by themselves. Why do we need state mandated boilers?
Well, I mean, because that's a great question, because just in the same way that gas cookers will be a thing of the past as well at some point, which I don't particularly want, because I much prefer a gas cooker than an electric one. But that will become mandated.
The ultimate source of electricity is still 80% burning of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So just because you don't see the pollution, in front of your face in that moment, the pollution is still happening just somewhere else.
But I mean, that's one of the big problems, is how we get away from the fossil fuel reliance. And I don't know what the stats. I remember Robert Winston, this is some years ago, wrote a book. He's written many books, but there was one particular book where he literally looks at all of the sort of important scenarios facing us, and one of them was alternative energy, and he kind of not quite debunked, but he basically pointed out the flaws in all the sort of alternative energy sources, probably less so nuclear than anything else. But it wasn't a happy read, let's put it like that.
No, it's not. And it's I mean, all these companies, so many people that are feeding on the teat of alternative energy, and they get the subsidy for this wind farm or their grant for that thing or the other. The whole thing has just been corrupted by rent seeking. It's really, and people trying to get stuck on the teat of government, basically. It really, but in any case, your initial point that once the COVID crisis has passed, the next one's going to be the climate crisis, and that will just mean another excuse for more state reach.
Right. And I think
that's why those concerns that people have, they might not articulate them as well as some top-notch television presenter, does not mean that their concerns are not valid.
I think I agree that there are more restrictions on the way, so brace yourself, folks. What's really interesting is that throughout the course of that, as we turned the temperature up, your internet didn't break once, so I think you might be generating your own energy there. I think we found a new source, guys.
There you go.
Actually, I knew that tweet would be there was no way I wasn't going to choose that tweet. I knew it would be a doozy, and it's led us off into various different directions. Actually, it sort of brings us to the end of the show. So do you want to just say a bit more? Just want to remind everyone about the film.
Yeah, my big thing that I'm flogging is this film about the history of the Edinburgh Festival. Adam Smith, father of the Fringe. If you look on my Twitter thing, you can it's linked to there, but you can watch it on Pam Your House. I promise you, if nothing else, just to learn about Adam Smith and his philosophies will justify the £10 that the film costs. But I promise you, £10 worth of entertainment.
Excellent stuff. So where can we see you next live as well?
I don't know. I've got some gigs booked in, but I think King's Head maybe next couple of weeks at the King's Head, downstairs at the King's Head in North London. Yeah,
well, always worth checking out their bills anyway. Obviously, they're great. Great stuff. Well, all that remains for me to say is thank you very much for watching. It's been a slightly bumpy journey. It's certainly better than having no show, which we had last week. And so it's great to get through that. And just to say, we might be taking, I haven't quite decided whether we're taking a 2-week break in August or a 1-week break. It all depends. I may have a guest for you on the 15th. I certainly won't on the 22nd, but we will definitely be back on the 29th. Just watch this space. I'll be doing clips from this show as well as soon as I possibly can, and also flagging up some of the previous shows. We do hope that we're going to go live at some point. We're going to have live Let's Kill Twitter events, which will hopefully happen before the end of this year. Let's see. Well, thanks very much for watching. I'll just sort of draw your attention to the ticker above my head, which has the Twitter handles for the show and for Dominic. And also, if you want to contribute to the show, there is a link to buy me a coffee, where we've set up a little page there. And I think that's it for now, really. Just to say, just thanks from both of us, really, Dominic, and just wave goodbye to our streamers.
Thank you very much for watching.